So literally, when the rules showed that gender-affirming care good, they decided to just bend the rules. Guys, Florida has been doing some absolutely bonkers shit. We gotta talk about it. But first, before we get into the things Florida has been doing, we gotta talk about the fan art section. Jedahan Barry brings in this one. So this is a thank you sketch for Suris because he got me out of an art rush. And I think he deserves it. He specifically, unintentionally, got me to come up with a character design for Roa's Mary Cares, an OC of mine. The circles are supposed to be the beads that his avatar wears. Well, thank you very much, Jedan, and I appreciate the fan art, and I was glad to be able to help you get out of an art rut. The next one we have here is from XLR. I made this a while back. Hope you find it entertaining. Suris and the Dragon. Oh, there's a whole dialogue here. Oh, dear. I feel bad for him. He's never seen a dragon before, let alone fought one. Maybe I should tell him to go home for his own safety. Slime Suris. Oh, yeah, yep, he's gonna die. Jorvik. Fear not, young lass. Jorvik is here to protect ye from the foul beastie. 'Tis nothing a man can't handle. Then again, the dragon might be awful hungry. I'm sure no one will miss this guy, right? Okay, now I'm betting money he dies. He's close. I can smell the beast's foul odor. Come, witness the glorious battle. And then, poof, disappearing happens. At last, prepare to face your end. Stay behind me, lass. Wouldn't want you getting hurt now. The dragon breathes a bunch of fire, and then I just go, good job, you sure showed that dragon. Negasaurus goes, I would have helped him had he not been a jerk earlier. First off, I'm not helpless. Second, this isn't my first dragon. Oh well, I guess we better report back to the mayor and let him know the dragon got away. There goes my pay. Damn it. I wasn't aware I could teleport, but I guess I can now. Hello, Bonbon. Hi. How are you doing? We should get a shout out for Bonbon Berry because they are a berry made of bonbons. As always, everybody, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that all said, let's go ahead and get right into the topic at hand. This one comes from Erin Reed, who does a fuck ton. She does an absolute fuck ton of work, compiling every single thing that happens with trans healthcare and the ways in which we are, in a lot of ways, losing it in the United States. Obama says, I'm doing well. I've entered my Minecraft phase again. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Let's see. Continue rating. On August 11th, Florida's Agency for Healthcare Administration banned gender-affirming care coverage from Medicaid. Meanwhile, the boards of medicine proceeded to ban gender-affirming care for transgender youth. To do this, they relied on a newly created Standards for Care for the Treatment of Gender Dysphoria that was rife with errors and omissions. Now, new court filings show that the Florida Surgeon General's office and the Agency for Health Administration purposefully manipulated this research to justify banning gender-affirming care, including a flowchart produced before the research was even commissioned, with the explicit end goal of care effectively banned. Worse, they utilized a consultant from a religious conversion therapy organization in order to do so. The newly minted Florida Generally Accepted Professional Medicaid Standards Determination on the Treatment of Gender Dysphoria were released on June 2022. Within a month, Florida's Agency for Healthcare Administration banned gender-affirming care coverage. Florida's Board of Medicine relied on it heavily in their ban of gender-affirming care for transgender youth as well. The document, which claims that gender-affirming care is an experimental one and does not meet medical guidelines, was immediately slammed by scientific and medical organizations and experts. So literally, when the rules showed that gender-affirming care good, they decided to just bend the rules. Fucking yikes. A Yale review scathingly criticized the report, stating, "We are alarmed that Florida healthcare agencies have adopted a purportedly scientific report that so blatantly violates the basic tenets of scientific inquiry. So repeated and fundamental are the errors in the June 2 report that it seems clear that the report is not a serious scientific analysis, but rather a document crafted to serve a political agenda." Now we have direct evidence that this was the case. In a lawsuit aiming to reverse Florida's Medicaid ban, the discovery process unearthed documents from the Florida Surgeon General's office. These papers revealed an unambiguous objective of the research: to arrive at an outcome where care is effectively banned. See the flowchart obtained in discovery documents. April 2022, Surgeon General issues guidance on gender dysphoria. ACA Secretary directs Medicaid to initiate the process. ACA report produced. Medicaid Director transmits signed report to the Secretary. ACA initiates rulemaking, and then the contract amendments care effectively gets banned. Jesus fucking Christ. To make matters worse, the Surgeon General's Office of Florida, which is supposed to make its decisions using rigorous scientific and medical standards, tapped leaders from its misleadingly named American College of Pediatricians, a conversion therapy organization designed or designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, to consult on its production. Emails show that Jason Wada of Florida's AHCA was put in touch with Dr. Andre Van Mol, a religious fundamentalist and conversion therapy supporter, also known as Man Who Deserves Brick to Face, supporter who chairs the Adolescent Sexuality Committee of the American College of Pediatricians. You can see in this email by the anti-LGBTQ extremism researcher Zinnia Jones from the Discovery documents in Florida. It says in here, "Dear Jason and Trey, due to two unforeseen family crises, I must decline serving as a consultant for the state of Florida at this time. My well-credentialed and equally expert in GD colleague, Dr. Andrew Van Mol, has agreed to take my place, so I'm introducing him to you in this email. Dr. Van Mol is a practicing family medicine physician in California. In addition to being published on matters of medical ethics and childhood gender dysphoria, he is a chair of the Adolescent Sexual Committee of the American College of Pediatricians and a spokesperson for the Christian Medical and Dental Associations. He will be an outstanding consultant for your team in terms of provision of the analysis of studies. He has cataloged the literature for as long as I have." Dr. Van Mol would go on to produce documents created by the ACP in order to have them enshrined into Florida's medical literature. One such document was developed in January 2023 and was discovered due to a massive leak of documents by the organization. This document is quoted by Jones as being a 129-page file of references and sources for anti-trans arguments, attributed to Andre Van Mol and dated January 2, 2022. You can find a full link to the first version of the document in Jones's research. The slightly updated document was directly sent to the AHCA with a few additions in order to help develop their standards of care, with the explicit goal to ban trans care, and can be found in the court filings. This document houses much of the now known to be deliberately distorted research that Yale scientists denounced as flagrantly unscientific. For example, Yale researchers highlighted how the Florida Standards of Care recommended that trans youth should not receive any medical care, asserting that psychotherapy alone, termed watchful waiting by the Florida Standards, is an adequate thing to do for trans youth. To validate this, the standards lean heavily on criticisms from a single doctor, Dr. James Cantor, while overlooking studies that demonstrate the effectiveness of gender-affirming care in reducing suicides. All justifications for this approach, including the dependence on Cantor, can be traced back to the documents from the American College of Pediatricians that Dr. Van Mol utilized and passed on to the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration. Dr. Van Mol himself is a noted proponent of reparative therapy and sexual orientation change efforts. He has published multiple articles in favor of conversion therapy, including an article that claims that homosexuality can be changeable, and that there is no evidence of harm in sexual orientation conversion therapy, despite research showing that conversion therapy raises suicide rates by as much as 800%. In a recent video discussing conversion therapy, Dr. Van Mol advocates for conversion therapy and asks for pastors supporting LGBTQ people to consent.
That was designed by a Roman Catholic psychologist, Dr. Joseph Nicolosi, since passed away. It's since kind of being replaced by reintegrative therapy. But reparative therapy, looking on their website, has these 4 basic rules. Disclosure versus imposing of the therapist's views, which is already a step up from what we have now. That the therapist would tell you, here's my view on this, here's what I'm coming from, instead of there's only one view on this and you will comply. Secondly, encouraging the client's open inquiry, which means the client and you can directly disagree, which already runs against the whole so-called, conversion naming thing they're talking about, that you're encouraged in this kind of therapy. Bring out your disagreements. Let's hear them. You're not going to get stepped on for it.
And then the disagreements will continue from the person who's the medical expert. And then if you truly want to try to change your sexuality, then you are free to be abused by the agency. Cool! Veronica Fox says, my GF was sent to conversion therapy camp. She almost didn't last long enough to know me. I'd probably be dead without her as well. Yeah. I'm sorry, conversion therapy shit is just, it's garbage. It's been garbage for years, and I did a video debunking the conversion therapy nonsense ages ago. It was one of the last edited videos I did. But let's go ahead and continue the article itself. The Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration and the Florida Surgeon General are now incontrovertibly implicated in distorting research to further their objective of banning gender-affirming care. The manipulated research was facilitated using materials generated by a Christian fundamentalist conversion therapy group, the American College of Pediatricians, and a consultant advocating for sexual conversion therapy, Dr. Van Mol, with the end goal of banning care explicitly spelled out. The newly established, quote, standards of care in Florida have been lambasted for flawed interpretations of scientific papers, selective omission of critical facts, and incorporation of unsubstantiated pseudoscience reviews by Yale researchers. Such practices in an academic context would warrant severe sanctions and spell the end of careers for those involved. It amounts to academic misconduct on a scale rarely seen, particularly given the subsequent use of this research to deny care to thousands of Floridians. The manipulated research has begun to infiltrate other scholarly arenas. A recent British Medical Journal article, Gender Dysphoria in Young People is Rising, and so is Professional Disagreement, cited by Florida to study and question the appropriateness of gender-affirming care as the standard of medical approach to gender dysphoria. Subsequently, an expert in the case of Decker versus Wada, which contests the ban on gender-affirming care, referenced the BMJ's article to back the ban. Ironically, that very article also relies on Florida's manipulated research. It reveals a striking lack of integrity for those involved in Florida to question the scientific validity of the care standards for transgender individuals, given that the state research findings were deliberately tampered with to endorse banning such care. The court will assess these arguments while deciding whether to overturn the rule prohibiting Medicaid coverage of gender-affirming care in months ahead. Documents uncovered during the discovery process will be instrumental in shaping the final judicial system. All right, so where do we get with all of that? What's the takeaway from all of that? Well, we know that there's, of course, the flowchart that was released in the court documents here that show that before any of the standards of care were even produced, they were already trying to ban care. So unlike with science, where the goal is discovery and figuring out where the trail of evidence leads, they already had a conclusion. They just did everything in their power to get to that conclusion. The research itself is causing a fuck ton of issues with any type of research on gender-affirming care because it literally is tainted research. It is research that peer review has shown is completely bogus, but politics has gotten so heavily involved in the conversations about trans healthcare that it is almost impossible to ignore those documents when you are talking with somebody who is trying to take away trans healthcare. There's a conversation that was tapped by the conversion therapy advocate we talked about, Dr. Van Mol, and it clearly states out, hey, here's this other person who's going to be replacing me. They actually believe the same things I do, so they'll be able to help you. Don't worry. Yale researchers have debunked all of these standards already, and concluded that so repeated and fundamental are the errors in the June 2nd report that it is clear that the report is not a serious scientific analysis, but rather a document crafted to serve a political agenda, as we mentioned earlier. So we've got a whole bunch of, quote, scientific research which isn't actually being done in the standards of what we would consider scientific research, and as such are failing peer review. But despite the failing peer review and inability to replicate the data that is being shown in these false reports, they are still being used because a politician doesn't need to care if the science they're using is correct. All they have to care about is whether it supports their particular agenda. And I can't wait to see the comments from, a particular few people who like to be in my comment section all the time, saying how I'm evil and a groomer and all that other fun stuff. I can't wait to see their response to this. They're never going to agree with sanity, but it's always funny to watch the responses while I'm on the shitter. But with that all said, this is where I have to ask you guys, where do you stand on all this? What are your opinions where this is all concerned? Do you think it's okay that literal tainted documents are being used for the purpose of banning transgender healthcare, where the science that has been peer-reviewed and researched multiple times has shown actually no, it is okay to give gender-affirming care to children? Gender-affirming care meaning, of course, blockers before they hit, or right as they hit puberty, and then HRT after the age of 16. And social transition in any other area. How do you feel when all of our research points to that constantly? Do you think it's okay to use the tainted document just because you personally disagree with trans healthcare? Or would you rather be, a smart cookie and follow research where it goes, even if the area the research leads you to is highly uncomfortable? But let me know that all in the comment section below after you've hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon, and as always, everybody, please insert end the video tagline here.